What's up there, workforce? Chris here.
Brian here.
And it is time to talk about our interview. Now, Yoshi-P gave 37 interviews over the course of multiple days. Different days were geared at different outlets. So you had like EU days and North America days. And we were there on the last day, and we were actually the last interview. So our interview was just after we had finished our playtime demo, and we had a chance to sit down. We actually shared our interview with somebody from Reddit. So you may see some of the same questions gone over there. Maybe she caught them a little bit differently. So it'd be a great chance to kind of go over there and see if she took a different set of notes. We'll try to include links down to everybody we know below, but there are 37 interviews out there. We don't know who all got one and where all they're posting them. I know that over the next few days, I'll be out there looking to see if anything was said in the 36 interviews that I wasn't a part of, but let's go ahead and dive in. So our first question, we kind of alternated questions. Our first question was around kind of M+. It was also centered on a question that I know Reddit was looking to ask. As we move into new class and dungeon design, can you elaborate on plans to add replayability to the 4-man content? Examples of this are a savage difficulty or getting into a Diablo rift or a deep dungeon modifier for increased rewards or glamour. So he said that it's not that they aren't thinking of it. Deep Dungeons is its own thing. They want to focus on new dungeons. ARR code is very, very old and hard to change. High-end 4-person content is something that they debate. But when they look at things like Baldesian Arsenal, which is the new Eureka content centered on, it's like 72-man content or something silly, opened up options based on its success. It makes them want more large-scale content instead of more 4-person Savage. They question if 4-person Savage would be appealing, but don't lose hope for a feature like this.
This is really interesting. There's a lot that I gleaned from his answer and how his body language spoke. And so I'm inferring some things just from a kind of professional courtesy perspective that we're both like, like how do you build these kind of systems? And when he talks about the ARR code, like this relates to why aren't the fate changes in ARR and in Heavensward and in Stormblood. And honestly, I think that means that from the development perspective, this game is built on stacks, where it's like ARR is here, Heavensward's on top of it, and Stormblood's there, etc. Now, that means that a lot of that stuff is built separate and then therefore independent of one another so that they can make changes within one system and not affect kind of the core gameplay. And then when he talks about the code with ARR, this is kind of really, this helped me understand why some of the things are the way they are. And I think it really comes down to the haunting of 1.0. The ghost of 1.0 is present. They had to spend, the fact that they built 2.0 and the speed at which they did it is mind-blowing. It's historic. It's unbelievable. The team should continue to receive praise for what they accomplished, and the fact that the game is still running today is a testament to it. But that also means that the development cost of going backwards and fitting that stuff in is astronomical, because those systems weren't engineered with this in mind. They never knew they were going to get a Heavensward. Nobody had ever done what they have done, hands down. So that being said, that's the way the game is, and that's why I kind of think that at some point, a cataclysm comes into play. Now, I want more large man content, so I think essentially, hopefully what they get to with this is that when we talk about like Diablo and we talk about the systems, is dynamic difficulty scaling brought into like a specific piece of content. But I think honestly, from a development cost, from a priority perspective, they're going to keep focusing in on what new content they can make, with still also like adhering to the idea that people can take breaks. It's like they're perfectly okay with you hitting a point where you don't have anything to do or that you want to do in this game, and they encourage you to take a break and come back at the next expansion. And I think that ends up being kind of a healthy thing. And I think that honestly means one of two things. They're going to either blow up this world at some point and then say, hey, now we've brought in all these things and we've kind of taken that time to rebuild it, or they're going to move us into the next generation version of some kind of Final Fantasy online, game. And I would still think that's still probably a good long while away, because 14 is their flagship. So who knows what the future holds, but that's actually what I got from this answer. The fact that they actually hammered on it a couple times. Don't lose hope, don't lose hope, don't lose hope. So could I expect to see this in the terms of Shadowbringers? Possibly, but I would bet if I was going to put money on it, it would be around 5.4. That's 5.4 is usually when they kind of bring in this content that kind of revitalizes going into the old content. So I got that they are fully aware, that they are fully interested in trying to make this work but it's going to take some time. And either they've been working on it and they're not ready to share what their plans are, or that they're always kind of looking at how can they do it, because obviously, like, if you make Savage level 4-man, you only have one person who can raise. Like, ultimately their concern is that if they put a lot of time into it, like, will people really be interested in it, or will they be more are they more interested in the Valdesian Arsenal and getting that from a structural perspective, like with World Visit and Eureka, like getting more people into that content? Well, Chris, what are your thoughts? What was your takeaway from this answer?
So it's a question that Brian and I have been trying to ask for a long time. We've tried to ask it, at FanFest. It was our next question, and we were next in line when they cut off the Q&A. So we've always wondered why there wasn't more of an M+, especially when Yoshi-P in adjacent topics has expressed an interest in things that go on in Diablo, has expressed an interest in things like the Greater Rift system, has expressed an interest in making older content replayable. But when talking specifically around making like a hard mode of dungeons, it was disappointing to see him basically say no, even if it wasn't because he didn't want to, just because it's something I've always really hoped for. So I was a little bit bummed about that, but I was really appreciative that he gave like a very honest answer about like why they can't do it. And it's not that the intent's not there, because that tells me that if they find an adjacent way to solve the same need, that we could expect something like that. So
hands down, 100%. They're looking to make the players happy. They like, ultimately, like, that's where I can't praise this dev team enough. That's why I can't praise Yoshi-P enough and what they do. Like, they're always looking to figure out how they can make it work within the system, within like what makes sense, because it's not always like, a lot of people like, and they might even think, well, just spend more money, just throw money at the problem. Like, Square Enix, aren't you making money? Why can't you throw money at it? It's about passion. Money is a part. You have to have funding to pay for the talent, but you also have like, are people more interested in making new dungeons, new mechanics, new stuff? And then who's the unlucky guy or group of people that have to go back and try to make this work without crashing the whole game? As an engineer, I speak to this just as from a professional perspective. If you tell me in 4 years we've released this application, and then you're like, hey, I needed to do all these things that were nowhere near the vision of what this app was, I have to go into the foundation. Like, thinking of you had to go into the foundation of your house. I have to reroute pipes. I have to like add things that like we would never plan for. The risk is really great that the whole damn house collapses. And so it's like, from a foundation perspective, that means there's like, you think that here's testing for Shadowbringers. If they had to go do that test, they'd have to test 4 expansions worth of content. There is so much work, so many things that are impacted, so many things that get touched, that it becomes actually harder and harder with each expansion. Thus, something at some point will hit a breaking point, whether that's 6.0, 7.0, 9.0. I can't tell you today. I would bet 6.0. I think 6.0 from a thematic perspective could be that. That could be exciting, but it could also mean that Final Fantasy 17 is also like, hey guys, yeah, like, we've learned all this, we have all these ideas, we've been working on putting them in at the foundation and setting up, like when we talk about an API, which we will shortly, like, how does this all work? That's I don't think it's bad news. His answers were sincere. If he could do it in a heart, like, he would do it in a heartbeat. Like, it's not that he does not want to, it's that he has to factor in 1,000 things that like we never consider on a day-to-day basis, because we're just like, can you just flip a switch? The answer is no, they cannot flip a switch, and that's really a bummer. But that's also, like I said, it's the ghost of 1.0. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, he's really honest when there's something he doesn't want to do. It doesn't hide in his face. He kind of cringes when somebody asks a question that he doesn't want to do. Like, why would I want to do that? And that wasn't the look that he gave on this one. So the next question was a question from Reddit. I don't have a user here, but I know that she got a lot of these from different users. So, are there any plans to implement a Hall of the Veterans to teach players more advanced concepts such as positionals and maintaining dot uptime? So first of all, this is on the heels of a lot of these questions people wrote and prepped before we saw the presentation. So we already know role quests are coming. And yet we did finish the entire event before we got our interview. And so some of these questions were adjusted in the context of what we now know. So here's Yoshi-P's response. It's something they are aware of, but are torn on how to implement it with updates. They are hoping it is easier to grasp with the updates that they just changed to the battle system. They're hoping that it's easier to grasp each job, and that this is a better time to consider adding a feature like this. And so, like, my initial response is that World of Warcraft has something now at level 100 that acts as this. We have the Hall of the Novice, but it's back at level 15. So on one hand, when comparing these two features, I think that it's way better that Final Fantasies is so early on. On the other hand, that means that you don't factor in any of your later abilities, and it's something that I think class job quests could do a better job with. But to create 17 of them that all basically teach the same concepts is a lot of work. And so the role quest is something that I really hope fills this need. And so in my mind, I hope that that's where he goes with this, that if the role quests are not already doing that, because we haven't seen those yet, that they would expand on the role quests and maybe make something like the carnival or whatever, like role quest kind of 2.0, role quest challenge mode, where you can go in and the only way you pass them is if you actually maintain perfect uptime, or you maintain threat on everything as a tank, or you keep everybody topped off, but you have a debuff that really limits your mana usage, so you have to be really efficient as a healer. And give people the ability to get a bronze, silver, gold, so that people that want to get better at the game can, without shoving it down their throats. And it acts as a bridge between the people who feel they're stuck in casual content because they're not at that savage skill level.
So
what do you think?
I actually, the frustration thing for me is that I think the answer is that people need more feedback to how they're performing. And I think that, not necessarily a live DPS meter, but a meter at the end of it makes more sense. That when you've cleared the content, just like in PvP, it's going to feed you with how do you do, and then compare you to how you did, last run and the previous run, etc. Are you improving? Are you not? Obviously, there's other factors. It's not going to be one-to-one, but when we talk about making that kind of, like whether the role quests actually address it or not, it's some kind of Hall of the Veteran or not, like at some point, like if they make a Hall of the Veteran, and then, the battle sys change, like those changes actually are more dramatic than like the level 15 changes. So it means that every expansion, that's one more thing that they have to go through and either redo, like they'd have to redo it all together if it's especially jobs based. But I think the simplest solution, unfortunately, is probably also still the difficult, because I think it'd be easy for them to add the end screen, credits, like, how you did to the newer content. Like when you talk about Shadowbringers, when we talk about 6.0, like the way that they've structured the game, it's easier for them to do that. But then all of a sudden people will be like, why isn't this in the Heaven's Word or the Stormblood or the AR dungeons? I want to see how I'm performing there, where I actually probably could benefit from it greatly. And it's like, well, then that falls back to his first answer and just the amount of work and how that game is coded. And then how the risk is that, like, it's a Jenga game. They built the Jenga tower of Heaven on High. Like, you're running the risk of inserting something that could end up being very, very different or challenging or hard to support long term. Hall of the Veteran seems like it's already optional. I think that they have to. I think what gives people motivation, and this is just personal perspective, Julie gets stressed out when she can't see how she's performing in the game, because she wants to she wants to contribute. I think that's her personality, and she's not given the information to know whether she's doing good or bad, and so we have to help her out with that. A lot of PlayStation 4 players don't have that option, and I think that at this point, I don't want it in real time, because that's toxic. I think if you get the clear, or make it personal to you, you've left the dungeon, it feeds you the information. How did you do? We already have the tools that tell us that. You just have to go outside the game for it. I think that ends up creating a disparity, in the player base.
So Julie's the perfect example. So Julie is somebody who doesn't have thousands of hours of play, and she does play games, like she'll play Call of Duty with us. And so Call of Duty is something that literally, when you quantify me and my brother's time, it's either in days, months, or years. I mean, literal amounts of playtime. It's absurd. And she hops on with us, and like, Brian's been teaching some classes and stuff lately at night, and so it's been time when usually she would be there with Brian, but she's there and it's just her and us guys, and she asks questions that I guess normally she'd be able to ask Brian offline about her performance, because a scoreboard pops up at the end of the match and it says, you were negative this and this and this, and we tell her things like, depending on the shooting game that we're playing, like, let's look at accuracy, let's look at things like this, and we can help address her play. We can help give her tips. We can say, when we're playing in custom matches and she runs around the corner and, doesn't kill me, even though she got the jump on me, then actually in voice chat, I say, Julie, like, the only reason you didn't kill me there was because of X. Like, you almost had me if you had just done this thing differently. And that's what this game is missing. This game is missing the ability, because you don't necessarily see somebody else's rotation. You don't see all that. So even if you play Black Mage, you go tank a dungeon for a friend learning how to play Black Mage, you don't see his UI, you don't see any stats, you don't see anything like that. So it's really hard for you to say, well, I noticed that when you get to fire 4 in your rotation, you seem to get flustered and it just totally throws off the rest of your rotation. And you don't see it. And so what it needs to have is, it needs to be a chart just for personal. If you want to screenshot it and share it with a friend, that's fine. That just has a pie chart that says, like, here was the sources of your damage. Like, wow, you're a Black Mage and you have like less than 0.5% of your damage coming from thunder. There's a pretty good chance that you don't have your dots up. And so it just needs to be something like that. And that, in addition to proper role quests, I think would really go a long way in helping people get better at this game.
Agree.
All right. So the next question was a Reddit question about API. So currently developers resort to web scraping as a means of supporting community projects. Is there any plans in the future to provide official API for developers' use? So this was one that he really paused a long time before he answered. So he said, first of all, this is really difficult. On the back end, everything is done differently with Square Enix, even compared to other gaming companies. It's different because you have a company focus on console gaming, as opposed to something like, he didn't this part, he said on console gaming. So just to kind of translate that, like, as opposed to something like Blizzard, where it's much more PC focused. So he said on console gaming, Yoshida is a PC player. So he does understand this, and he says it would be good, but some fear things like server load, some fear things like security. So really what he would want here, and he really emphasized this, would be a lot of feedback from us to know exactly what it is we wanted to do with it. And I think that what he's looking for there is, like, help me make a case for you. Help me understand why you want to use this. And in my mind, the two biggest things we want to use it for, besides like cosmetics and UI changes, is the parser and the Mogboard.
So his basically said it's political, and this could fall into various legal reasons. It could fall into, like, legal counsel could be saying, hell to the no. We have billing information in our system. We have all this other information in our system, and maybe it's not, where it needs to be, or maybe, like, to the point where, and it could be just completely secure, but you have this kind of panic in which that, like, will we expose our customers? Will we expose these people? And the fact also it's global nature. It's like under the laws of Japan, like very, like, it's a political reason why. And his case where, like you said, Chris, like, I think essentially, like, if we could literally sit here and say, here are the 10, endpoints that we need. Here are the 15 endpoints that we need that are going to get us this information. We can make so many calls per hour. We can make, like, here, this is what we need. Because we don't need to sit here and, like, especially in real time, like, when it comes down to the market itself, I don't need to know real-time data. But if I could have historic data, like, give me that. We can analyze that. We can create, a UI like Mogboard. But it's like, let's go ahead and do a lot of these things so we can have that information. We can even make it maybe even easier on the servers themselves and more efficient. And that's all we need. So they could create an endpoint that is just that it's like, here's what you need. Here's the parameters, etc. I honestly got a lot of hope out of it, because if he's sitting here saying, like, just give me the use cases for this kind of stuff, and then say we just want to open these kind of ports. Not ports in this case, that's more networking, but it's like, here's what we're going to open. Here's how you apply for a key. Here's how many calls you get. That way, because again, like, every call is an access to the data itself. That's work that has to happen on the server. We don't want to sit here and, like, kill the servers because they're too busy making these giant queries, right? So it's like, at the most, how much can be returned. What's the ultimate file size? What data do we need to see? Because we don't need to see everything. maybe want to know the item, the server, what it was sold for. In that case, same thing kind of goes with all that. But if they could actually open it up to APIs, we could see more tools, and that's where like it is a good step in the right direction for more, add-ons, and in which that it's like now, like if we've empowered the community to have these tools, we start interlacing them into the game itself. I think that's a win. Where then from their development staff, they're empowering freelancers to volunteer their time, and then they can take that and say, oh, that's actually a really useful tool. Let's go ahead and bring it into the main game itself.
Right.
I honestly, I was really excited to hear him talk about the API, because I understand why, and I understand that basically he said, if you want it, this is what I need. Because they could theorize every day, and that's like, what are the endpoints? So community, let's get together on a consensus. Let's tell them what we need, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we get it. I wouldn't know the ETA on it, but at some point it would come out.
Yeah. All right. So now it was our number two.
Number two.
Right. So the next question was from us, and it said, the changes to the fate system are really exciting. Yet once a character does not need experience, there is a content gap after being capped on tomes for the week. Other games like Destiny 2 and Guild Wars have rewards that would be similar to Glamour to keep things that offer experience relevant. And really, the goal of this question was to start focusing. This one required a lot of translation back and forth because he wanted to be sure he understood what we were upset about. Because what we're really asking here is, once I have all my tanks at cap and I have all my tomes capped for the week and I don't need the gear, why would I tank? And there was a back and forth here.
He shifted into the idea of the adventure need, and that's not where we wanted to take it.
Right. He's like, well, don't you like getting materia? And it's like, but what about when I don't need materia? Like, I think he thought that a lot of these needs were more endless than they are. And so it basically turned into a dialogue between us that was about explaining like what the frustration is. And it kind of felt like we had hit on something that maybe they didn't quite grasp, at least why our portion of the market doesn't just tank more. Mm-hmm. So they're making tanks casual as if that's the gap, and that's the reason that we need more tanks. But that isn't the sole reason. We also have people who are willing to tank. Like Brian's willing to tank, and he's like, I got to run on my Astro because my Astro is not a cap yet, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So like, then you have somebody who would be willing to tank, but it's not like he gets an experience scroll at the end that increases the rate at which he gains experience on his Astro later, or on a DPS where it's like, okay, now I have this potion of experience that gives them bigger experience boosts. So I can actually tank a dungeon and then make up the time on my DPS later by getting some of that applied towards it. There isn't anything like that. There isn't any glamour. And so he basically just said he would look into it. Like he didn't really have an answer. He mostly just asked us some questions in response for clarification to make sure he was understanding what we're saying. And it actually felt like we kind of caught him off guard here, which I guess I felt a little bit concerned about.
I actually liked it. I liked the dialogue that we ended up having, because essentially, for those of you who aren't aware, it's that Destiny 2 and Guild Wars is like, once you're at level cap, XP is still valuable and it rewards you with something. Not more power, but glamour. It could be mounts, minions. Essentially, if you take XP and turned out like every level past 80, you still are at your level 80. But with that experience, what do? You get a level's worth, millions and millions of XP worth of of experience. And it does nothing for you because you're capped. Why have that limited? Why be capped? Why not have XP have some value? And that's what we ended up talking with him about. And that could be, they could address it any number of ways. I think ultimately, we actually, I think I felt heard. I think that he, like when he says he's going to talk to the devs about it, that he heard about the concept, like a glamour level. Like, why not say that you're, like 81, 85, 90, like, or whatever, like they decided to kind of differentiate it. So once you're at 80, it's like, oh, he's at G1, G2, G3, G4, and just let it go as high as it can for that expansion as a form of like, hey, instead of XP hitting the floor like loot in certain raids, like you're just getting it. It's just feeding you. It's just this passive currency that it isn't the reason why you do anything, but it also isn't, it also gives you some kind of reward for doing it. So if I'm a level cap on everything and I see tank a need, I don't need Matera, I don't need any of that. Oh, but that's going to give me at least one glamour level, and that's going to give me this loot, or that's going to give me a chance at a mount, or that's going to give me a chance, like, da 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 da. It could be any kind of thing they do. And so that ended up being the conversation. Obviously, he's not going to sit here and say, yep, it'll be out for Shadowbringers, but I could see that something. I honestly felt like it was a really great conversation that we had with him about that concept.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to even see something like a Paragon system that was geared at each expansion. So when you run dungeons from a certain expansion, or do side quests from a certain expansion, or beast tries from a certain expansion, you build up that kind of like Shadowbringers Paragon level, and that lets you do things like apply discounts to teleports to Shadowbringers Aetherites, apply faster mount speed within Shadowbringers zones above and beyond what a riding map or something like that would traditionally offer. You know, apply discounts to repairs from Shadowbringers vendors, or I don't know. It doesn't have to be anything super game changing.
Right.
Something a little bit nice. Maybe it drops delivery fees by 1% to retainers based in that expansion. So the Kugane retainer on the market board isn't as much of a penalty as maybe some of the ARR zones. So I would love to see them implement something like that. It just didn't seem like that would be it would be anything soon.
Yeah.
And
not soon, but the fact that it's like, yeah, he's going to talk to the developers. What we did not get, which I was happy to hear, is that, that's going to be so hard. Like that, we didn't get the ARR code wouldn't allow for it or something like that. Where it's like, no. Like, okay, yeah, let me talk with the devs about it, which is exciting because hopefully that inspires them thinking outside of the box of something they might not have been thinking about. But that's why I was like, let's talk about the Diablo system, as Yoshi-P is a fan and he wants to make Diablo 4.
Right. We tried to reference games that we know that he is not only aware of and well-versed in, but also that he seems to admire features from, because obviously there's something to what he's admiring. And so it'd be interesting to kind of pick his brain on like, well, what is it about that game that you kind of wish your game did better without asking that question directly. Yeah. So the next question was a Reddit question. Trusts have been revealed to be a large part of Shadowbringers. What is the selection process for deciding which NPCs will be available? Will only relevant story NPCs be part of the trust system, or will we see a collaboration of characters or minor NPCs be a part of the system? So he said, you will only be taking story characters at this time. We may expand it, but we have no plans for anybody outside of story. You may find that certain combinations in certain dungeons are unique, but because of this, we're going to have to limit the roster due to dev time. Today was limited to MSQ, so like today's the demo, the trial we played was limited to mask MSQ. So expect more depth and immersion than what we saw in the demo time. We look forward to feedback, but we anticipate requests. And so to kind of elaborate on that, basically when we played today, there was very little of the voice acting and stuff that was described, but that was to hide story from us. So they intentionally stripped features out of the trust system. So our opinions on trust are a little bit skewed until we get more hands-on time, live version. And basically that each character added is now going to create unique experiences and all the other things. So if you have 5 characters available now, that's all these different combinations. And if you add a 6th, they now need unique things for this person, this person, this person, this person. They also may have unique things to a specific dungeon that hint around the lore and the fluff of that dungeon. So you could be running something months from now and have a phrase offhand that you have not heard before.
That's actually one of the things that's really exciting to hear about it, and it gives a reason to actually go back and do these dungeons with trust, even if you're playing with people, if you're interested in the lore, because I'm assuming that those are going to kind of feed you with more context and characterization for the characters themselves. So I'm really excited to experience that personally as someone who really enjoys the lore in this game.
My concern was that I was really hoping that trusts were going to be something as more of like a catch-up mechanic and a play by yourself. So as somebody who's not super lore driven in this game, I was hoping that trusts would be, but having played with trust, that totally set my mind at ease. So I think this is a really neat feature. I think it's really important to the game. And this also along the lines of like some of the things they said in the presentation to us, where they talked about how basically they can guarantee that a trust would never be able to outplay a player group. I think this is good, and I think I'm excited. I would love to see them add kind of a glamour system to it as well, so you can get seasonal versions of certain characters or something like that as some way to like kind of spice it up a little since
I think that's coming. I just don't think that's coming now. Like when they say that like like they're anticipating requests, whether it's 5.0 or some patch within 5.0, I think that going forward into 6.0
Yeah.
and beyond. Like, we're going to see that system continue to expand. And it would not surprise me at all if all of a sudden at some point there's seasonal trusts to go out and acquire. 11 has like 130 or some odd more now, and they didn't all start out like that. So it's like, I think this is a really strong starting point. And he hit on the concept of collabs. Like, they don't have any plans for that right now, but like it sounded to me like, and maybe I misheard him, but it sounded to me like, yeah, like they're open to it at some point after all this backlog stuff is finished. Then they'll be like, okay, that's a bigger conversation. That won't, I don't think, happen in the life of at least the next year and a half.
Now they also, like, I didn't really ever think of trusts as a storytelling tool. And the fact that they're not mix and match right now, you're either all in a trust or you're all players. You can't just say like, I want to take the healer because Brian and I don't have a healer, but then us and one more friend will fill out the group. So I do think it's a really interesting tool, and I do look forward to it as a form of offering immersion to the people that seek that out.
Yeah, I would love to see it as a mix and match, where it's like, okay, we're short, somebody's not here today, let's fill it with the trust and go for our clear, and that they show up, then we'll replace them. But that's just where I fall. That's where I hope we get at some point. I don't know if that's on their plans.
So this led into a question that we asked on the same topic. The trust system is clearly inspired from a strength of Final Fantasy XI. Can you explain other systems like Conquest or trusts being used in open world or older content that are being considered to keep the world engaging on a more everyday basis? And he almost immediately said, no, right. There's no plans. And then he paused and he thought about it. And he said, so the reason he was so quick to be able to answer that was that it would require a total change to the way AI functions in the game, that they would have to lose their personality because those are basically scripts that you're playing through, and that they are tied to story, and that the change would be very resource expensive. So around 4.4, they did add some source code that allowed more updates, but basically like not at this time. They appear to be, he kind of phrased it like they appear to be something really unique, and you're having this really unique lore experience, but it's kind of more like you're having a really unique experience in like an interactive museum, where you go through it and you have this interactive and it feels really cool and it tells you a story, but then I go through right behind you and it tells me the same story. So yes, there are hundreds of stories to be told, so you will always feel like you're having a unique experience, but it's still very much following a script, and that the open world is just too many variables.
Yeah, and that's where like that ties into also just the how do they bring that into other systems. So that was, I mean, honestly disappointing. But I understand it from like just the amount of work that it would take. And yeah, like I like the system, and having played with it, like, yeah, it's perfect. It's specific for that. I hope that that's not how it's always going to be years and years and years from now. I think this is a good jumping off point. He led into the chocobos and how that system is, like archaic. A lot of this comes back into, again, ARR, and what I call, like what I'm saying is the ghost of 1.0. Like a lot of the things that why you have companions, why you have squadrons, and why you have trust, how these are three different systems, is because they're three different systems on design. They're not one integrated system. They're separate because there's so many things that, like, for whatever reason, like the amount of work that we saw when turning your chocobo companion into a pet, like all of that took a lot of work. And I think that, like, in order to do some of that, like with the trust system, how it's all scripted, I think that's like it goes from, hey, we can do this in this amount of time, this will be cool for dungeons, to what would it take to do the open world, and they're like, oh, 1,000 times that time. And so it's, who knows, like I think we can keep asking for it. I think that with the fates and how that system's changed, like when we talk about it, like, because it would be a blended party, you fill them with these trusts, etc., just like with your companion or just like your squad. But I think they have a lot of work cut out for them just based off of the nature of how the game functions, and I wouldn't expect to see it anytime soon, and I'm bummed by that.
Yeah. So the next question was actually similar once again. As the trust system is coming out, are there any further plans to enhance the companion system by adding more companion options? And this was actually where they said that they had updated the source code and that they do plan for more updates down the line.
Yeah, they had to get that first one done back in 4.4, and then down the line, hopefully we'll see more there. And that's either level or whatever, yeah.
So it seems like a lot of this is kind of building off the same code, and that when there's already something in the works, he wasn't going to elaborate too much because they're already working on something. So this answer was so short, but he was so positive about it that it felt like definitely expect some more changes to the companion system, hopefully sometime throughout the 5.x series. And then we were on our fourth question. We thought we'd only get 4. So, as we see New Game Plus being mentioned and more synced content to allow players to play together than ever before, what are the plans to help new players catch up on the amount of MSQ and still feel invested in the world and story that we have spent the last 10 years building? He took a big breath before this one. So, we want to address MSQ. ARR is very long. We do plan to introduce a feature called Circles. That's its dev name, to join new and existing players. Also wanting new players by themselves as its own concept. One of the other concepts we're looking at is new players feeling lonely and that they're not paired with players from the same time period. We could picture this as something like a class of 98 or a 156 squadron, so that you could kind of look at people clearing like the current ultimate and say, wow, that guy's from my graduating class. So the concept of circles is something that I heard some of the other creators mentioning, so I don't really understand what that feature is because it seemed to be the answer to multiple questions. But the goal is to put new players and old players together in a form of content that will kind of help new players carry them along. So this answer seemed to reveal the most information and yet left me with more questions than it answered. How did you feel?
Pretty much the same. I love the idea of being a part of a class like within your grand company. I think that kind of helps bring out more interest and more connections there. I'm interested in circles. All of that is still like maybe on the even in the design phase. Like they're still trying to figure it all out. The what ultimately I wish it would do is that address like how do we play together, and whether New Game Plus is that answer. I feel like we know nothing about what New Game Plus is. I feel like said they were going to talk about it and then they didn't. So something has maybe changed there. So ultimately New Game Plus is this weird mystery where I want to see level sync in the open world. I want to be able to share, like, see what quest you're on so that as a veteran player, I can sync down and we can play together and have a good time and not have to constantly drop party and things like that. That's what I was hoping to get in the discussion, and we didn't end up getting into that direction. But what he did share was interesting, but I would say is probably still a whiles away. And that then still gives me with that feeling that they're either going to need to calamity the world or we're going to move on at some point in the next 5 to 6 years. And that's not a bad thing. Like none of that's a bad thing. I just think that there's just a lot of work that has to happen, and we'll have to see what ultimately pans out. But the idea of circles and the idea of my graduating class is exciting, and hopefully that is retroactive to everybody who's already been playing the game. Like, would I be a part of, like, what squadron would I be a part of in that case? Because I joined my squadron back in 1.0 and then had to redo that in 2.0. So I don't know.
I assume they would take all existing players and lump us in, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Sorry, legacy players. So, the Samurai and Red Mage gear, starting gear, is currently unobtainable if you throw it out. Is this something you're aware of? And if so, are there any plans to add them to the Calamity Salvager or allow us to obtain them in some other way? He honestly kind of like looked up and smiled and said he never thought of it. That he basically said that he just assumed if somebody threw out the starting gear that they didn't want it. And it's something that they can talk to the item team about and would actually be a fairly short order change. So this is the kind of thing where like she asked this question from Reddit and like this could be like a 5.1 change. Like he's like, oh yeah, totally.
You want that? Oh, Oh, I'll talk to the devs.
All right. Just like, well, here you go. So that was a very, very short question. And then challenge log.
Challenge log.
Oh, is this? Oh, this starts to be questions. We got off our script here.
Yeah, we were ahead. It's like, oh, we have time. Perfect.
So at this point, we were given 45 minutes, and so we started to shift off of the pre-written questions that we've really thought about, and so this gets a little more free-flowing. And Brian, you were at first, and you asked challenge logs and achievements. Basically, they're adding an achievement watch list, which is super cool. When you open up your achievements pane, you can now like add them to a watch list, so you can quickly get to them, kind of like a favorites tab or a bookmark.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you were hoping that either challenge log things that you're getting close to or achievements or something like that would literally appear in your quest log. So you don't have to keep opening up that pane and say, okay, how many, I've killed 57 of 60 things in Eureka this week.
I think I've almost done all the quests within Stormblood anyway. And so it's like that quest log right there is pretty empty. It'd be so cool to be able to be like, what are my achievements that I want to attack and see that as progress? What are the challenges for this week that I want to attack first? And see that, especially like when you look at Eureka with 60 kill 60 whatevers, like, yeah, I'd like to see that either. And I'd said that I'd be fine with it if it was even in the chat log reporting some kind of feedback like the hunting log currently does. But I ultimately would love to see it as a part of like a journal item in which says like you are like you are making your own quest to do this, and then let me help you track that quest in the journal,
Right.
Yeah.
So Brian did that as a suggestion. The Samurai Red Mage gear question was actually, I believe, her fifth.
Mm-hmm.
And so then he let me ask one last one, but I know she came with like a whole written list that I have a copy of here. And so we went with the last question off of her list because I did find it really intriguing. So would it be possible to earn achievements or special rewards such as unique gear or titles for completing old content while synced to minimum item level? This question is for you, Scott. So he just smiled here and said, we would love that. We would also like it to be timed. And like literally like the staff in the room laughed when he said that. But right now we can't check if you swap gear. So we would have to look at a way to lock that. So right now, if you went in as minimum item level, you could literally like just swap gear and break minimum item level. So you would have to find a way to lock that and then lock in the time. So he kind of pictured like a scoring system.
I was surprised by the fact that you could go in and break the minimum eye level by just changing your gear. So that's like a one-time thing that it applies. So I don't even know if that's known, and because again we don't do minimum eye level content because there's no reason for us to do it. And I was like, all right, we're done. Scott over there is doing it because he wants the challenge.
And he right clicks off the echo every pull.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a manual choice on his part. But if they could add settings like that, do it without the echo, do it without these things, then like, okay, if you want it to be done for the achievement, you go in and you do it through this. It's probably another tab. Mm-hmm. And so there's this other tab and you go run content, like minimum item level for the purpose of the achievement.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be really cool. It kind of makes like a sub-ultimate layer of a bunch of old content that you can go try. Mm-hmm. So I thought this was a really neat last question. I was really excited by how excited Yoshi-P was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the idea of timed is just like, yes, that sounds awesome. It sounds like, and then have a leaderboard or whatever, and then let's go, because that sounds fun. It sounds like something like, what are we doing? Like, well, let's go see if we can break the high score, and figure it out. Because that also helps, I think, train us. Like, if you're looking for quote unquote savage content, like that's what it is. Like, it's like a hard content that you go into and you challenge yourself at, and if that timer has some kind of gold, silver, bronze, kind of tier reward thing, it's like, well, hey, can we do this? They have so much content in this game. It's just a way of like making that content interesting in a different way, hopefully without too much work, in my opinion.
Right. And without requiring that they recode something that is impossible.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that was really it. I feel like we took just as long as the actual interview. It was 45 minutes with Yoshi-P, which was super cool. I will say that it was weird to walk in and like shake his hand. I don't know. It was awesome. Afterwards, he asked us if we'd like a picture. It was like, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, please. Yes.
So it was really neat. It brought a lot of perspective into like what it is that like this channel has offered us. So thank you guys, first of all. Brian and I just like talking about video games, and so this was a really cool opportunity. We really like Square Enix games. We've always liked Square Enix games, and 14 dominates our time. So I know that there's huge portions of the community that only know us for the Final Fantasy 14 is dying video or the Sorry About Destiny video, or the fact that my Should You Play Final Fantasy 2019 video doesn't have gameplay in it. Like, that's all they know about us. But we love talking about this game to the point where we ramble about it and we post like twice a day about it. And so it was really, really neat to get to sit across from the director who makes so much of this possible with as little of a language barrier as possible, and just ask all the questions that I feel like we sit here and soapbox about in our little corner of the internet, and see kind of what he thinks and why things are the way they are.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, man, you pretty much summed it up 100% for me. Like, this was a real honor, a real treat. I felt just so blessed by this community to have this opportunity. I felt really, just humbled by Yoshi-P. 37 interviews. The man is a tank. He was exhausted. We were outside. He was catching a smoke break, and you and I were outside like, oh my god, da, 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 and just talking about, gushing over like the different job changes, and he's over there just laughing at us, in a good way. Like, I think he was really happy to hear it, because he just seemed very pleased with our response to the various different changes, because the guy loves this game, him and his team. Like, just the fact, like, these people are busting their butt, and we're not, like, we're going to be critical of the game where we feel like it needs critique. We're not going to sit here and say that everything's sunshine and rainbows about the game, because it isn't. But it's at the same time, like we have to look at within the balance that what he's done, what they continue to do, it's truly, like, I think, something magical to witness, and it's a great community to be a part of. So we really appreciate the opportunity to sit down with Yoshi-P, and we really appreciate y'all watching this video up to this point. So for Work to Game, my name is Brian.
My name's Chris.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Hey guys, it's me, Brian. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you're new here, we hope you hit that subscribe button. Check us out. We talk a lot about video games, and we hope to at least hear from you in the comments below. We also try to respond to our comments. We really appreciate the comments, the discussion, all the various points of view that everybody is so kindly, I guess, and politely or impolitely shares with us from time to time. So anyway, guys, again, thanks for watching this video. We hope you hit that like button. We hope you hit that subscribe button. Come back for more content each and every day. We post a lot around here, and we'd love to hear from you about what you like about video games and everything, and especially if you have any questions that you're stuck on in anything. So anyway, signing off. See you next time.